This chapter so far sheds the most amount of light and gives us the most insight into the mystery of the Poneglyphs and Gol D Roger.
One Piece, Chapter 301, I Hereby Guide.
Well, hello, my brothers and sisters of the Nerd Nation. I, as always, and absent for almost 5 whole days now, am Jim, here to bring you another review on the awesome, the intricately woven, oh my god, it's just so good, the tale of One Piece. Now, certainly, I've been a little bit backed up just because of, me being sick and what have you, so I do appreciate those of you that have, certainly sent me messages, just all the kind words, the well wishes. Definitely, I'm feeling a little bit better, not 100% yet, but have been anxious to kind of get back on the horse, especially with One Piece over here. So, our last chapter, chapter 300, of course, was, it was really everything kind of culminating and coming to the end, and everybody just having their big old party up in Skypiea. And that's how the chapter left off. This chapter picks up and it takes a decidedly different tone, and it's very cool. It starts out with Luffy kind of waking everybody up after days of partying, and he's like, hey, guys, quick, we're going to steal all the gold. I'm like, what the hell? What's going on with this, right? So we wind up finding out, it goes back and forth a little bit, but the real meat and potatoes of the chapter is really what it reveals, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. I'm actually going to read a few things from the chapter. But it's funny because Luffy's whole plan is to steal some gold. Now, the Skypians, remember that a bag of dirt to them is worth more than, a brick of gold. Gold's not worth anything to them up there, right? But that kind of mentality of like, oh, geez, we have to steal the gold. So Luffy recruits, Sanji and Usopp, a bunch of them, to go and actually go inside the sleeping snake, Nola, the ruler of the sky, and to go, because when he was in there, he must have seen a bunch of treasure and stuff like that. So part of the chapter is just seeing them inside this sleeping snake going and finding all kinds of jewels and crowns and everything else that this thing has just sort of eaten up and just devoured over the years, right, over its 400 years. So very funny stuff. But really what winds up happening is the Shandians, of course, and the Skypians in general, but the Shandians have been looking for that golden bell, right? Ever since, of course, Luffy wound up hitting through a Nell to hit the actual bell and dislodged it from where it was at. So they wind up finding that it actually landed on the fallen giant Jack, and they get a number of people over there and eventually are able to go and kind of wrestle this thing back up and out, right? It's a very important piece of their history and for their ancestors and everything else. So one of the pillars that held the bell up, is actually broken, and but the bell itself is still intact, which is great. Robin had went and kind of followed them off. Ganfal is there, the Shandian chief and what have you, and Robin goes and she wants to read the Poneglyph, right? And I kind of like this because they're like, what does it say on the side of there? And they have no idea because, nobody that's alive now has ever actually seen this thing. They just know that was their task, was to protect this, So I love this because Robin goes and stands up and she starts reading everything, and she says, hold the truth in your heart, keep your mouth silent. And then she goes, we are the ones who weave history with the reverberations of the Great Bell. Now, obviously, we heard that, several chapters ago, a couple different times through flashbacks and whatnot. We know that's the Shandians were tasked with protecting this Poneglyph, right? But the thing that I thought was real good, as she goes and she reads through this Poneglyph, is it talks about the ancient weapon that bears the name of the god Poseidon, its location. Now, if you remember, we heard on Alabasta, Crocodile was obviously after Pluton, which is another type of weapon, which for some reason I was thinking was like a nuke or something, Pluton, plutonium, that sort of thing. But obviously it's some kind of weapon, as well as, and then they revealed that there is another weapon, this Poseidon, right? And that was neat. That was kind of neat to see, But then somebody goes and points out to her that there is actually some writing similar to the Poneglyph writing that actually looks like it was done on the side, right? And she goes over and reads that, and she goes, I hereby guide this document to its end, Pirate Gol D Roger. And I was thinking, son of a bitch! Now, about 50 chapters ago, right? And you can go back and you can look for that review. Right after Conus and Pagaia, right after Conus got saved by Ganfal, when he kind of swooped in and saved her, before Luffy and them went into the trials. He was up there talking about pumpkin juice and talking with Conus and Pagaia and talking about the Blue Sea people and how they're pirates and they're actually regarded as criminals down there. And then talked about how he made good friends with, whatever it was, 15 or 20 years ago, a pirate, right? Son of a bitch. And I had guessed it too. I said maybe Gol D Roger was up here. Maybe this was the path he took on his way to Raftel, right? Well, I guess it is. And the real cool, significant thing of that is that, remember the Grand Line itself. When you start out, there's like 6 or 7 different paths that you can take, right? So we know now that this was the path that Gol D Roger was on 20 years ago, right? Because then Ganfal comes out and he's like, oh yeah, I know him, and he was here 20 years ago and this and that. Ganfal had no idea that he actually found the Golden Bell, and if you think about it, you know, Gol D Roger must be one pretty badass dude, because not only did he make it up to Skypiea, but he found the Golden Bell with the Poneglyph, right, you know? And then went and actually put in his stuff in there, guide this document to its end, Gol D Roger. The cool significance of it is, number one, he was there. And number two, we know that we're on the path that Gol D Roger was on, the very same path, which is great. It's great news. It's the biggest revelation that I've seen so far that I can come up with, and the biggest piece of information on the huge overarching story. And Robin goes and figures out that basically what it is it's pieces of information, right, that all connect to go and fill in this lost history from all these different poneglyphs. So you go from one to the next, and she believes that Gol D Roger obviously was able to complete that or near the completion of that, maybe at Raftel, however you pronounce that, the final island in the Grand Line. So it's very, very cool information to get, and to find out that Gol D Roger was actually there. And then the other thing, too, is this bell was lodged up where nobody even knew for 400 years. It was up there at cloud. How the hell did this dude find it, man? You know, it's like a hound dog, man. I just thought it was cool. Everything that winds up coming from it, and it's real neat too, because you get this interaction between Ganfal and Robin, you know, and he's talking about this and that, and he goes, from that Luffy fella, I kind of got the same vibe, the same type of feel as I did from Roger, you know, and she goes, well, his name is Monkey D. Luffy, and he's like, oh, the same middle initial, the same initial, that can't be a coincidence, and she goes, yeah, I'm pretty interested in him as well. So Robin, who has quickly become my favorite, or one of my favorite characters, obviously there's a lot more to her as well, so I think that's great, that's great too, because I think I might have backed the wrong horse. At the time, I think it was okay with Nami, because I backed the dark horse. Nobody really said that was their favorite character or anything else, and I liked her for a couple hundred chapters, probably even up until about, until Skypiea, where we actually saw a little more of Robin, and now we realize that she's a bigger part of the overarching story. So definitely very, very cool stuff, and certainly very neat. And I love that, how it's just like, she's like, is the real Poneglyph? It can't be, and I just love how it is. So then she also winds up telling the Shandians that, listen, your job is done, okay? The document is going to be carried to its end. Gol D, right? It's already served its purpose, So then they're just like, the chief starts crying, and he's just like, we no longer have to fight anymore. And I just thought that was great. And he's like, our ancestors' wish was fulfilled. So now these people, they don't have to fight anymore, first of all. And second of all, they're like, oh my goodness, it's just like a weight being lifted off of your chest, right? So that was very cool, I thought. And then what was really neat is you get all that stuff right in the middle of it, and then they're like, you know what, we want to thank you, sea people, you blue sea people. You say that this gold is worth more than Verth, right? So they go and they're like, do you want this pillar, this huge pillar that held up the bell that broke off? They're like, we can't give you the bell, but we'll give you this pillar. And she's like, sure, yeah, I'm sure they'd want it. So like 10 guys pick it up, and they're like, oh, and they all heave-hoing it back to, where Luffy and them are. Well, Luffy is like, and everybody's getting ready. We got to get on the ship. Hurry up. Where's Robin? And Zoro wants to leave Robin, which I think is hilarious. He's like, just leave her, whatever. I'm going to go off and the blah, blah. And they're like, so they start calling him Mosshead and idiot and everything else. And Usopp's like, if you take 3 steps into the woods, you'll be lost, which I thought was great to play on those characters' strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, Zoro's is like, directions. He doesn't know where the hell he's going. And it's even more prominent when you watch the anime, which I think is really funny. But nonetheless, though, so they see Robin coming, and Luffy's like, hey, yeah, come on, we're stealing all the gold, and we're leaving. And they're like, dude, they're all behind her. They think that it's something bad, but the Shandians don't really give a shit. The Skypians don't give a shit. It's just gold. They don't care, right? They don't care that they went inside this giant snake and took a bunch of stuff. But with Luffy, it's hilarious, though. Have no regrets. We got to leave here with something. So they're getting on the boat, and they're like, come on, we gotta leave, And so the Shandians are like asking Robin, they're like, don't they want this, And Robin's like, oh, I guess not. And she just kind of smiles, So the chapter winds up ending with Luffy over here, just this great look of Luffy, running over here. And he's just like, run away! And the Shandians are all like, wait! So I can't wait to see what happens in the next chapter. Nonetheless, though, man, it was a really cool chapter, and the sad thing about it is that as I was starting to come down with my my sinus infection there, several days back, I had actually read the chapter, and a lot of times when it's a real good one like this, I'll go and I'll read it over a couple of times, and then record my review. And I read it, and then I went to go and hit record, and I was just so stuffed up, and I just sounded so much like this that I was like, I can't even do this. Like, my head hurt just talking. So I just kind of put it on the back burner. Luckily, though, I had already been kind of, taking cold medicine and everything else, and I was already so out of it that when I went and I read it again, the only thing that really stuck and that popped out at me is I was like, oh yeah, Gol D Roger was in Skypiea. So anyway, nonetheless, though, a great chapter. My chapter question for you, though, brothers and sisters, is what are your thoughts on finding out that we're on the same path as Gol D Roger once was, and finding that Gol D Roger was actually in Skypiea? Leave your answer to that question in the comments down below. Feel free to hit the thumbs up, the like button if you should think that I deserve it, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We will look forward to catching all of you in the next one, nation. Well, after this chapter, I think Robin is definitely my favorite character because I think that she is going to be the most integral character in the overarching story that is One Piece. Oh, remember to check me out on Twitter and Facebook as well.